How do you do that? How do you consolidate, the fact that there's lots of people doing the kind of thing that you want to do out there? How do you manage that personally? How do you manage that relationship? Because I know, speaking for myself, sometimes that's a handbrake in my process. Like I'll close into my studio and I'll start the creative process, and then I'll think I'm the only person in the world with this really smart idea, and then I'll go out and start the research process after the initial kind of creative process, and then be exposed to the fact that there are many people and many artists tackling the same topic, and some have actually resolved my research question in a way I could never resolve it, and then I'm confronted with myself and whether I'm going to continue the project or not. How do you grapple with that?
I mean, I think it's always like that first kind of fear, let's say, of that you find, and it's like, oh, my great idea is not, the first idea, and it might not even be that great. But on the other hand, I think then I think about it and it's like, okay, I'm doing collage, let's say. It's like, how many landscape photos have there been in the world of photography? And that never stopped anyone else from making a landscape photograph. So we have these kind of barriers that we put on ourselves because it's a new thing. And it's like, people have been working with collage for 100 years or whatever. And it's not that surprising to find that we're all inundated with that. What I do feel is that then it forces one to think, okay, what is it that I'm doing by working this way, or by looking, how am I looking at the materials or the world or whatever through my own, and I think trying to be sensible to that, and trying to be honest about it, and I think that's where it's not so much if the work looks like someone else's work, but that your work has something else in it that makes it your own as well.
Like the process of self-reflexivity, which is responding to your own environment, your own self, your own working process, and where you're at. And with that in mind, for you, I mean, you have quite an interesting point of view on the world, because you're a citizen of the world. You come from Colombia, you've lived in South Africa, you've studied internationally, you have a PhD in anthropology and a master's in photography, and now you commute between the United States and South Africa. So that must put you into quite a interesting perspective, or it must be quite interesting how you see the world. Like, how do you bring all of that into your work?
I see it more like I'm this dislocated person, and so it's been more like coming to terms with that in a real kind of professional way, obviously in a personal way, and so then taking that as a way of working as well. So thinking, okay, this is how I live, this is how I think, so how can that be reflected in as a process, as a way of working as well.
Yeah.
And that's how I've been thinking about it.
So you kind of cut yourself out of your environment, and then you're sticking, you sort of paste it all over the place with collage.
Well, more or less, for example, for this work, I was working with some materials that had accumulated, from Colombian magazines that had been accumulated for a long time. And then I had started to accumulate some magazines from South Africa, let's say, for a while as well. And then, well, why don't I put them together? And at the beginning I was like, well, why would I put them together? Because people are going to look, what is the relation? And here's well, it's me. That's how I'm looking. These are the places where I'm collecting material. This is how I'm working. It's not that I'm trying to make a trace between the two places, for example. I'm just working about, in this case, for example, it's about white masculinity and violence. It's well, it's not like these are the only two places in the world where that kind of takes place. And so, but those are the materials that I'm working with. So I felt comfortable bringing the two together and mixing them together. and it's recognizing that as well, you know, and
And
or even sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, and tracing your own archive, because, you know, your own visual archive, because you've been in those places and you've made observations of, you know, in your case, white masculinity and violence in Colombia and in South Africa. And yeah, and putting those two together then starts to draw parallels that only you could have experienced on a lateral level.
Totally. And I think a lot goes back to, you know, I used to be very like, I'm going to go do this project in Colombia, and then I'm going to do this project in Mozambique, you know, like, and then like doing the work that became the book, like Stains of Red Dirt, which was the kind of based in Joburg, let's say. That one was where I was really forced to think myself, okay, where am I and how do I look at the world? You know, and it's me photographing in Johannesburg, but mostly from my house, you know, pre-pandemic. So it's that kind of really made me think, okay, this is, you know, like this way that I am recognizing that I am, you know, based here, not from here, but have been tied to this, but it's not really necessarily about this place specifically. So I think it's a way of getting away from that idea that I had for many years, that you're working on a place or on a thing or something, but rather you're working through those types of things. And working through that means then working literally through all of the things.
Yeah, it's like our nervous system, right? It's like we you know, we might be in a place, but how do we neurologically respond to a place? And that sensory input and output is what becomes, you know, the work, really.